Good evening. I'm Bill Butel, and this is ABC News New York. Tonight, Salvador Allende's widow has arrived in Mexico City, saying fascism has taken over in Chile. The UAW is still on strike against Chrysler, and the talks go on. The Poseidon missile has passed an important test off the coast of Florida. And today, if you were in the right cities, you could sit at home and watch the home team play football. I'll have details in just a moment.
An attic bedroom up under the eaves, with a place for the one thing that will make her new house a home. You made every board by hand. Isn't it nice to know that the people who moved it understand what a familiar little house can mean in a strange new one? Allied Van Lines. We move families, not just furniture.
Okay, Qantas. First, you bring thousands of tourists to Australia. Now 100,000 pounds of American stuff a week. And every night, a flight to clutter up my backyard. I have had it, Qantas. No more, Mr. Nice Guy. I hate Qantas.
It was a tearful and emotional moment in Mexico City today when Hortensia Allende arrived to begin political exile, now that her husband and his regime in Chile are dead. Luis Echeverria, Mexico's president, was at the airport to meet her, and Mrs. Echeverria broke down and wept. There was a crowd of maybe 3,000 waving banners protesting the death, the suicide, if that it be, of Salvador Allende and of his dream of a Marxist Chile. Mrs. Allende, who went into exile with members of her family, said the whole world should protest her husband's death, and that fascism has taken over Chile. In Sweden today, voters elected to keep the government of the socialist Prime Minister Olof Palme in power. We have a report from ABC's George Watson in Stockholm.
The Swedish election was fought in sparring style compared with America's bruising campaign, but the stakes were high nevertheless. Voters threatened to throw out the durable Social Democratic Party for the first time in 40 years.
Sweden's strict election laws prohibit lavish spending, so most of the campaigning was done at informal street meetings like this. The campaign boiled down to two competing claims. The Social Democrats argued that Swedes never had it so good, but the opposition claimed it was high time for a change. The leading opposition candidate, Thorbjorn Fälldin, promised to decentralize the ponderous government bureaucracy. Opinion polls gave him a good chance of ousting Prime Minister Olof Palme. But 90% of the Swedish electorate, about 5 million voters, went to the polls this morning and decided that they preferred the status quo, including Prime Minister Palme. Palme himself cast his own ballot early this morning at a school in suburban Stockholm. He looked tired and haggard. Tonight, as the votes were counted, he forged ahead and won a wafer-thin victory. So the Social Democrats will continue in office with Prime Minister Palme at the helm. Voters decided not to rock the boat of Swedish prosperity and social welfare. This is George Watson, ABC News, Stockholm.
Gunmen in Northern Ireland have killed a Protestant leader named Tommy Heron, the head of the Ulster Defence Association. Political sources said Heron was probably killed by Protestant extremists who opposed his more moderate policies. The fear in Ulster now is that this shooting could cause open warfare between feuding groups of Protestants.
To a dentist, a kid growing up is a mouthful of cavities. These are the cavity-prone years, ages 5 to 15. But some kids get fewer. One reason? Colgate with MFP fluoride. Only your dentist can give teeth a better fluoride treatment than Colgate. Even Colgate can't guarantee just one cavity per checkup. But for fewer cavities, get Colgate with MFP. Only your dentist can give teeth a better fluoride treatment than Colgate.
Beautiful shine, huh? Hand rubbed 100 times with paste wax. Now, Woodcrafter furniture polish gives you that kind of hand rub beauty in a spray. Woodcrafter has a special blend of two waxes, Carnauba and Monton. Gives you such hand rub beauty, you can't tell it from paste wax. Try Colgate's new Wood Crafter. Wood Fresh or Lemon Wood Fresh.
Negotiators for the United Auto Workers Union and Chrysler Corporation spent their Sunday at the bargaining table. The UAW strike against Chrysler is 2 days old now, and there was no indication of any progress at today's talks. A congressional study released today says that even under the best conditions of weather and supply, some local shortages of home heating oil can be expected this winter. The report says that unless President Nixon imposes a mandatory fuel allocation program, disastrous shortages could result in some sections of the country. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, made up of those Middle East states which supply the West with something like 85% of its crude oil, said today its member countries aren't being paid enough money for their oil. So the countries plan to ask Western oil companies for more money. Concern over Arab oil supplies appears to be causing a bit of a shift in America's Middle East policy. ABC's Jerry Landy reports.
Henry Kissinger has told the Israeli government privately that after it gets by next month's elections, the U.S. wants Israel to take a more aggressive, imaginative approach towards settling her long dispute with the Arabs. Kissinger's message could telegraph the beginning of a subtle shift in Washington's Middle Eastern policy. Reliable sources say that Kissinger gave the word to Israeli Ambassador Simcha Dinitz when Dinitz met with him here earlier in the week. Dinitz has since returned to Israel to report to his government. As Kissinger reportedly sees it, centerpiece of that more imaginative approach might be an interim agreement between Israel and Egypt to reopen the Suez Canal, an idea that's been tried before. In the meantime, despite pressures from some Arab oil states, Kissinger is said to have reassured the Israeli ambassador the U.S. will continue to support Israel and that there will be no retreat from American commitments of military aid stretching into 1976. In short, no coercion by Washington to impose a settlement. But it's believed the U.S. will at the same time be seeking ways to improve her relationship with the Arab states. Jerry Landay, ABC News, the White House.
The Navy's Poseidon missile has had a lot of trouble, but it was successfully test-fired last night off Cape Kennedy. ABC science editor Jules Bergman has a report on the test and the Poseidon's problems.
3, 2, 1, missile away.
The nuclear submarine Francis Scott Key was cruising submerged in the Atlantic off Cape Kennedy when the Poseidon rocket was fired yesterday on its first test launching since its problems were revealed by the Navy. The launch, from all signs in the Navy's own report, went perfectly, with the missile traveling 3,000 miles downrange to the South Atlantic target area. But the Navy refuses to say whether the 10 multiple warheads on the Poseidon deployed correctly and accurately hit in their target areas. The Navy admitted this week that it's going to have to recall all the Poseidons and modify them to correct warhead problems. The exact numbers are classified, but a substantial number of the multiple warheads have gone haywire after launch. Perhaps as many as 3 out of the 10 carried. 20 of our nuclear submarines now carry 16 Poseidons each, and more subs are being refitted for the long-range rocket, the country's prime underwater strategic missile. Whether they work and how well is the critical issue. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News, reporting.
Martha Mitchell got on the phone to United Press International this evening and said her husband John has left her. Mrs. Mitchell says Mr. Mitchell left on the advice of his lawyers, and she says she's glad to see him go, that he was just sitting around watching the football games. John Mitchell used to be President Nixon's Attorney General, as you know, and his campaign director, and he's been indicted in New York in connection with Robert Vesco's contribution to the president's campaign last year.
If there's a gun in your house and you're worried about accidents, let me tell you about a new kind of lock for it.
It's called the Master Gun Lock. It's a real lock. It covers the trigger so the gun can't shoot. And it'll fit almost any gun. Don't take a chance on an accident. Get a Master Gun Lock and get some peace of mind.
Aren't you glad about little kids? Aren't you glad about grandpas? Aren't you glad about the people who are glad to be with you?
Dial soap makes being with people even nicer, because Dial works to remove bacteria on your skin that cause odor, so you feel fresh all day.
Aren't you glad about the people who are glad to be with you? Aren't you glad?
Aren't you glad you use Dial soap?
The professional football season started today, and for the first time, National Football League games were televised in the cities where they were being played. On Friday, President Nixon signed a bill into law which lifts the local television blackout, where games are sold out 72 hours in advance. Today, the president was in front of his TV set to watch the Washington Redskins play the San Diego Chargers in Washington. ABC's Bill Downs went to RFK Stadium to see who besides the president stayed away.
Washington's football-happy Redskin fans disregarded the lifting of the home game blackout. They turned out 53,000 strong, a season ticket elite which had bought out the house in advance. What was missing today were the groups of neighborhood youngsters who usually hang around outside RFK Stadium, hoping somehow to get in. Today, apparently, most of them were at home in front of TV sets.
Larry Brown has a first down out across the 30 to the 34-yard line.
So far, these people in this neighborhood are not able to go to see it, so this blackout being lifted is a very good thing for the neighborhood.
Inside the jam-packed stadium, the fans paid up to $12 to sit in each other's laps. Most agreed the lifting of the blackout was a good thing.
On a bad day, though, would you stay home?
No.
Why?
Well, I love the Redskins. My wife does, too.
I don't think it's going to hurt anything, no. It's more exciting to be here.
Incidentally, the Washington Redskins defeated the San Diego Chargers by a walloping 38-0. Bill Downs, ABC News, Washington.
Now that the new football season is underway, we have a report from ABC's Charles Burke on one middle-aged gridiron enthusiast who's a fan with a difference.
Most men his age get their ration of football sitting in the stands or in front of a TV set. Mal Dixon prefers to play the game. At 43, he's a freshman at Fairleigh Dickinson University. He's also the oldest college football player in the nation. It's been 20 years since he last played organized ball. That was in the Army. After that, it was marriage, 4 children, and jobs as manager of restaurants and retail stores. Number 87 takes a lot of kidding about his age, but that's not surprising. He's trying to keep up with men half his age.
My reactions perhaps are not quite as quick as the younger ball players, but I try to make this up with determination and desire. I really enjoy playing with them, and at times I feel perhaps just as young as they are, and I more or less forget that I'm 43 years old. Once I become involved in what we're doing, then everything else just fades away. My conditioning is good. I think I've been conditioned enough to go a full game, and I think that's what it takes.
Dixon gets encouragement from his teammates and his family.
I think it's wonderful. It's great. Something he always wanted to do.
Do you worry about us being injured at all?
Yes, that's in the back of my mind. I can't help but worry. There's the possibility. Because I know football is a pretty rough game.
Mal Dixon gets no scholarship, no grant and aid for being out here. But a quarter century after high school, he's finally doing what he always wanted to do. He's a student in college, and he's playing football there. Charles Burke, ABC News, Teaneck, New Jersey.
That's the world of national news. I'm Bill Butel, ABC News, New York. Thank you. Good night.
This has been the ABC Weekend News with Bill Butel. Monday through Friday, watch the ABC Evening News with Howard K. Smith and Harry Reasoner in color. This has been a presentation of ABC News. She's alone at a roadside diner. Her husband has disappeared and they're coming after her. Cloris Leachman stars in Dying Room Only. The Tuesday.
Yard punt, 4-yard return. We'll be back in Milwaukee. Right up.
Decolletage, frivolous. Oh, hi, Mr. Dunny. Like my new sweetheart? GE Portacolor TV. What a buy. And it's 80% brighter this year. How? They improve what they call the inline picture tube. Right, pal? This baby's one great performer. And for under $225, GE means value for your money.
Oh. General Electric Television, the great entertainer.
No one knows what the future holds, but inflation seems to be a fact of life. So when you invest for your retirement, you might consider variable annuities. It's just possible a variable annuity might help your retirement keep up with the cost of living. For a free prospectus, call your Aetna agent. He's got lots of ideas for your retirement. Aetna Variable Annuity Life, one of the Aetna Life and Casualty companies.
Packers will take over 1st and 10. They will move from their own 19. With 8:15 remaining in the first half, they lead the New York Jets 3-0. Scott Hunter going all the way thus far, the third-year quarterback out of the University of Alabama.
They agree in the supermarket. It's a good thing there's a Ralph's.
The big news continues now on KNXT Channel 2.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide in Washington, Bill Plant in Detroit, Terry Drinkwater in Denver, Richard Threlkeld in San Francisco, David Culhane in New York, Daniel Shore in Washington, and Roger Mudd in Washington.
Good evening. The strike against Chrysler, only 2.5 days old. The United Auto Workers have announced a tentative agreement has been reached in contract negotiations. Bill Plant reports from Detroit.
As UAW members lined up to register for strike duty and benefits in the gray chill of Monday morning, union and company bargainers were nearing the end of a 23-hour negotiating session. After a 3-hour interlude, UAW President Leonard Woodcock returned to the table and in mid-afternoon brought in the anticipated news.
We would like to announce that we have reached a tentative settlement with the Chrysler Corporation for the P&M and parts contracts in both the United States and Canada, of course, an international contract. We have not yet reached settlements in the 2 salaried contracts, the office and clerical and the engineering.
113,000 P&M, that's production and maintenance, and parts workers were affected by the strike. Office, clerical, and engineering workers remained on the job. Picket lines will stay up at least until the contract ratification procedure gets underway. The union called its executive board into session this afternoon and has scheduled a meeting tonight with the presidents of Chrysler Locals, probably in an effort to get its membership back to work as soon as possible. Woodcock declined to release details of the settlement until the union leadership has had a chance to meet with its local presidents. But it's believed that the two sides were able to reach agreement on the stickiest issue in this bargaining, the union's demand for an end to compulsory overtime. Bill Plant, CBS News, Detroit.
Because of the complex ratification process, it could be a week or more before the auto workers return to the Chrysler plants.
Smith Corona introduces the first electric typewriter with a hole in its side. That's where our new ribbon cartridge goes. For professional-looking results, there's a special film cartridge. And for mistakes, you can get a correction ribbon cartridge. See Smith Corona's new cartridge ribbon typewriters now in electric portable and office models. If you can't remember the whole name, just remember the whole.
Sue? Sarah, I'm at the store and I'm confused. For the first time in years, I need a laxative. Sarah, there are dozens of them. Powdered laxatives, mineral oils, candy types. I'm confused.
Get the Phillips, Sue.
Why Phillips?
Phillips Milk of Magnesia is thorough and gentle. And of all those laxatives, Milk of Magnesia is the kind doctors recommend most often.
Doctors do?
Sure do.
Donald Segretti, the alleged dirty trick specialist of the Nixon re-election campaign, has agreed to plead guilty and cooperate with the special Watergate prosecutor. Daniel Shore has the details.
Segretti, his case transferred from Florida, became Prosecutor Cox's first defendant.
I do not think it's appropriate at this time for me to make any comment whatsoever.
You did tell the magistrate that you were cooperating, Mr. Segretti. Would you tell us in what way you are cooperating?
I think beyond that, I don't think it's appropriate. The U.S. Attorney, I don't believe, would want us to comment on that.
Segretti agreed to plead guilty to an expanded indictment charging violation of federal election laws by dirty tricks against Senators Muskie, Jackson, and Humphrey in last year's Florida primary. The tricks included cards distributed at a Wallace rally saying, "If you like Hitler, you'll love Wallace, vote for Muskie," and posters saying, "Help Muskie support busing our children now," and forged letters on Muskie stationery accusing Jackson and Humphrey of sexual misconduct. The charges carry a maximum of 4 years in jail and $4,000 fine. But Segretti was freed without bail, and there was no sign of his being prosecuted for activities in other states. Cox's assistant, Richard Davis, declined to say what kind of deal the government has made with Segretti.
Well, we really can't go into what understanding we might or might not have with Mr. Segretti.
Why not?
Because actually that is improper. Well, the only understanding is that Mr. Segretti is going to plead guilty, and as I stated in court, he's cooperating.
Neither side will discuss Segretti's understanding with the prosecutors, which will probably limit his case to this indictment. But it is clear that the prosecutors are less interested in Segretti for his dirty tricks than as a witness against those who put him up to them. Daniel Shaw, CBS News, at the federal courthouse in Washington.
E. Howard Hunt, one of the original defendants in the Watergate case, today asked the judge to change his plea from guilty to innocent and dismiss the charges against him. Hunt, who was the first to plead guilty, contended that the government withheld evidence that he could have used in his defense. In the aftermath of Watergate, Democratic Senator Walter Mondale of Minnesota has proposed creation of a commission to re-examine the office of the presidency. Mondale said Watergate was the result of a 36-year trend toward a presidency, quote, larger than life and larger than law. Roger Mudd reports.
Mondale said today his commission proposal is not intended as an insult to Richard Nixon, but as a responsible and serious attempt to cut the presidency down to life size. Mondale said, however, he is not sure Mr. Nixon will sit still for such an inquiry.
I think one of the problems of Mr. Nixon, he's showing contempt for the decent concerns of American people. The people are sick over Watergate, and they're sick over this pattern of illegality and arrogance, and they want to respect their president. They want a strong president, but they want a president who remembers who elected him and who he works for. And they want a president who realizes that the law applies to him as well as everyone else.
Of course, Mondale is no disinterested White House watcher. He could be a contender for the Democratic nomination in '76. But today's speech, he said, has nothing to do with that possibility, only with trying to make the presidency more open and accountable to the people. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
An Oklahoma-based computer company, Telex, today won a $350 million anti-monopoly suit against the world's computer giant, IBM. A U.S. District Court judge in Tulsa ordered IBM to halt monopolistic and predatory practices in the computer accessory market. He also ordered Telex to pay IBM $21 million for theft of trade secrets. IBM said it will appeal the decision, which industry observers said could bring on similar suits from smaller computer firms and could strengthen a long-pending federal antitrust suit against IBM. On the New York Stock Exchange, IBM closed down 26 points. Telex was up almost 4 points. The Dow Jones Industrials gained more than 6 points. Volume was 15,100,000 shares. The average price per share dropped 1 cent on the New York Exchange. It was unchanged on the American.
Greyhound's got a big change coming. The exciting new Americruiser. It's more than just a beautiful bus. Call it an American revolution in travel. More stretch-out room, a smoother, quieter ride. More revolutionary ideas inside and out to make you think twice about going any other way. Americruiser the beautiful. Join the American revolution in travel.
It feels like all this acid is churning up inside me.
Oh, this pressure. It must be gas again.
My heartburn is back.
These people are talking about what we at Digel call gasid indigestion. Because at times when you get acid indigestion, it's often accompanied by gas, too. Digel is made especially for gasid indigestion. It not only reduces your excess acid, but gets rid of trapped gas, too.
Digel made me and my stomach feel better.
Digel for gasid indigestion.
34-year-old Edna Stanek of Lakewood, Colorado, increased her family by 6 last night in less than an hour's time. At a Denver hospital, Mrs. Stanek, who had been taking a fertility drug, gave birth to sextuplets, 4 boys and 2 girls, weighing from 2 pounds 15 ounces to 3 pounds 11 ounces. If the babies live, it will be the first known case that sextuplets have survived. There are no baby pictures available yet, but the proud father held a news conference. And Terry Drinkwater reports.
Doctors at the University of Colorado Medical Center told reporters this afternoon the mother is in excellent shape.
that 5 of the babies are in satisfactory condition, and that 1, the smallest girl, is in just fair condition. But there is cautious optimism for the survival of all 6 of them. The 31-year-old father, slightly dazed looking, was asked what was going on in his mind.
All the little problems that'll crop up over the next few years.
Like what?
Beginning with the 2 o'clock feeding.
What are their names? Have you accomplished that yet?
We only have 5 picked out. We had 6, but there were not 3 girls. So.
What are the 5?
First, the 3 boys were John, Stephen, Jeffrey, and the 2 girls were Julia and Catherine.
How do they look to you? Could you describe them?
Well, they're a reasonable size. Color is pretty good. A little thin. They have hair on top.
The Staneks now live in a 3-bedroom home. They already have a 4-year-old son, so soon they'll be looking for an 8-bedroom house. And that
astronauts weren't doing too well playing with them in weightless space. They tumbled out of control as they flew, and the crew had to go flying around after them. So, like good engineers, they went back to the drawing board. Commander Alan Bean explains.
So we designed 2 additional new gardens right here. One with sort of slightly improved fin area, and the other with greatly improved. Let's see how they work. Okay. It didn't stick too well. Seemed to have pretty good stability, but just didn't stick. And a miss. As you can see, one of the advantages of throwing darts up here is when you miss, oftentimes they come back right to you. You don't have to go get them. Another miss. Slow one here. Looks like a good one. Good stick, too.
The United account makes your banking a breeze. For a low monthly charge, you can have all of these. Cashier's checks and money orders, traveler's checks for crossing borders, all the scenic checks that you can use. You get a safety deposit box and bank by mail to save you all. Some loans with interest rates you can't refuse. And as an extra added plus, you get all.
The United account, a wealth of banking services in one package from United California Bank.
That's my Ken. Bless his soul, loves to eat. Oh, look at him pile it on. I'm not worried, though. The dip and the dressing are really low in saturated fat and cholesterol-free. They're made with delicious new Matey, the low-saturate sour dressing, the only one made with safflower oil. Great on fruit salad. Use it in your favorite dessert recipe, too.
Come on board with Matey, the new low-saturate sour dressing. Low in saturated fat, cholesterol-free.
KNBC, Los Angeles.
This is NBC Nightly News, Thursday, October 4th. Reported by John Chancellor with David Brinkley's Journal.
Good evening. The Florida Attorney General for Dade County, which includes Miami Beach, said today that he has evidence the Republicans used secret listening devices last year in the headquarters of the Democratic National Convention. Richard Gerstein, the chief state prosecutor for Miami Beach, says this information was developed from statements made by James McCord, one of the convicted Watergate burglars. McCord this afternoon denied any knowledge of the operation. The Florida investigators say the illegal bugging took place during the Democratic Convention in July, which was held less than 1 month after the Watergate burglars were caught in the Democrats' headquarters in Washington. The Florida investigators believe this operation was part of an espionage plan submitted by G. Gordon Liddy, later convicted as a Watergate conspirator. And they say that Special Watergate prosecutor Archibald Cox has asked them to delay prosecution because it might interfere with his work.
The investigators say the Republicans rented an apartment in the Octagon Towers just across from Convention Hall. In that apartment, they installed equipment which picked up signals from microphones hidden in the Democrats' headquarters at the Fontainebleau Hotel, a mile and a half away. Here's more on the story from Steve Delaney in Miami Beach.
State investigators claim they have hard evidence that G. Gordon Liddy's plan to bug the Fontainebleau Hotel during the Democratic Convention was actually carried out after Watergate. The information comes from men already convicted in the Watergate break-in.
Based on information we received during an interrogation of James McCord last summer, we learned that the Fontainebleau Hotel had been bugged during the Democratic National Convention and possibly at other times. This bugging was a result of the meeting which took place on Key Biscayne on March 30th of 1972, a meeting attended by the former Attorney General John Mitchell and others, at which time the entire Watergate conspiracy was planned. Well, rooms were rented under a fictitious name, under the name of Hamilton. This was an alias used by E. Howard Hunt. Evidently, they wanted to bug the important persons in the Democratic Party to find out what was happening in the way of political plans and what was happening during the convention. And we have every reason to believe that they successfully carried out this mission. It was a political espionage, but it involved much more than dirty tricks. It involved illegal bugging, which is a crime in this state. But Mr. Cox's office has asked us to withhold prosecution, and for the time being, in an effort to cooperate, we're going along with their request.
Gerstein's staff believes the listening was done from the Octagon building across from Convention Hall, where Republican staff workers were pulled out of a leased apartment just before the Democratic Convention, allegedly to make room for the bugging crew.
The lease was signed by Hugh Sloan, Jr., the treasurer of the Committee to Re-elect, and Jeb Magruder, one of the staff members of the Committee to Re-elect. They were instructing the local people here, local party workers, to arrange for this apartment. And they subsequently signed the lease, and the check came from Committee to Re-elect headquarters.
Well, you're assuming then that the Committee to Re-elect, at least in the person of Sloan and Magruder, set up this apartment as a listening post to carry out the plan that was made in Key Biscayne in March.
That's what.
In other words, to bug the headquarters hotel of the Democrats.
That's what the information we had.
They seem to be the same people.
Sloan and Magruder arranged for the rent of the apartment, signed the lease, and paid for it. Now, whether Sloan and Magruder were physically present in the apartment, we don't have any knowledge of that.
And Liddy was supposed to get it done.
Liddy originally was supposed to get it done.
And he told Hunt what to do.
That was prior to their arrest in Watergate. Now you have to look elsewhere. When Hunt and Liddy and McCord and the Cubans are arrested,
then they're out of troops.
That's right. And if it was carried out, it obviously had to be carried out by someone else.
And you think it was?
Yes.
And you think you know who did it?
Yes.
But you're not ready to go to court because the Cox people are asking you to hold back?
That's correct.
To sum it up, the state of Florida is anxious to go to court to prove its charge that the Democrats were bugged during their convention, that the listening was done from a 9th floor apartment in this building across the street from the convention hall, and that the orders to do it came from the White House and the Committee to Re-elect the President. If what the state charges is true, the officials responsible for Watergate learned nothing by having their men arrested in Washington. Instead, several weeks later, they went out and hired another bugging crew and did it all over again here. Steve Delaney, NBC News at the Miami Beach Convention Center.
The story told by Gerstein and his investigator is known to both the Senate Watergate Committee and the Office of the Special Watergate Prosecutor, but neither group has had access to the evidence Gerstein says he has, and neither group has been able to prove the story. When we contacted one of the Republicans named by Gerstein today, he said he'd never heard of it, and he added, "We were stupid, but not that stupid." Also on the program tonight, we'll have the latest figures on wholesale prices, which are down. We'll have a report on the latest court action involving the president's secret White House tapes. The Congress today voted a historic limitation on the president's power to make war. We'll report on that and on the next to last appeal, which was made today by Lieutenant William Calley, convicted in the My Lai massacre.
My hogs are better than yours.
Oh, yeah? Well, my price bull's better than yours.
Them Campbell brothers, always trying to better one another. I catch more fish than you do.
Well, I'll match my pickup against that old thing of yours.
In what way?
Toughness, ride, comfort.
Show.
All right, here's for 74 Ford pickup. Beauty, huh?
It's okay.
Look, nice storage area.
It's okay.
Let's go.
Following scenes are reenacted.
All right, now we head across country. No roads. See how it takes bumps?
Not in bad.
That's because of Ford's twin I-beam front suspension.
Yeah?
And I got full foam seats, optional air conditioning built right to the dash, optional stereo, and a tough double-wall cargo box. Buford, how about Ford's car-like ride? Morning already? Buford, you're home. What'd you think?
Well, my hogs are still fatter than yours.
Drive the 74 Ford pickup at your Ford dealers now. Works like a truck, rides like a car.
The government reported today that wholesale prices fell almost 2% in September, the biggest drop in 25 years. It reported also that wholesale food prices fell 6% in September. Normally, such a drop would soon show up in lower retail food prices, but as Irving R. Levine reports, that may not be the case this time.
Supermarket prices are not expected to go down as much as wholesale prices have. That's because the wholesale index doesn't include such costs as cutting meat, packaging, advertising, and retail costs such as these have been going up. Furthermore, many retailers did not pass on all of the recent big wholesale price increases, and they won't pass on all of the wholesale decreases either. So the best prognosis offered by administration economists on the basis of today's wholesale figures is that the big jumps in food prices are behind us, and retail food prices should start leveling off, but near their present high levels. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
It is true that wholesale farm prices did drop considerably, but they've been going up most of the year, if only because the economic program of the Nixon administration never froze prices at the farm level. And that's had a profound effect on the way some farmers live. Here's a report from California.
For Robert Oakey and other California farmers, 1973 will be the most profitable in 28 years. Oakey grows almonds and peaches. Oakey has managed to take about $12,000 a year out of the farm for his wife and 4 children. But this year, there's some extra money for the things the family had to do without. The Oakeys bought a camper van this spring and took a rare vacation from the 15 hours a day their farm demands. The good year means Oakey will repay the rest of the $150,000 he borrowed to run the farm. A few miles away at the Muller farm, things are good enough this year to remodel the kitchen and buy some new furniture. This year, Dave Muller will pay off his farm loan. The family income will be $50,000, more than 4 times what it is normally. The Mullers were even able to buy a new air-conditioned tractor. California farmers are earning more this year. While they've got it, they're spending it on things they can't afford during lean years. But the farmers admit that their high profits won't last.
Next year isn't going to be as good as this year. There's no way that the conditions can be duplicated 2 years in a row. So we know that the fall is coming, but it's nice being on the crest for a change.
Vic Biondi, NBC News, Stanislaus County, California.
There's not much difference in pain relievers that you can see, but in your bloodstream, the differences are very real. While all 3 leading pain relievers reach an effective level in minutes, in the final analysis, only one of them hits and holds the highest level, Anacin. This difference is the extra pain reliever Anacin provides when you have a headache. Remember, the difference in Anacin is the higher level of pain reliever. Anacin relieves pain fast.
Recognize these? They turn water blue in bathroom bowls, but do nothing about germs that grow in bowls. Now introducing new SaniFlush, the only in-tank cleaner that inhibits germ growth. Read the labels on other in-tank cleaners. Nowhere will they say they do anything against germs. Only Sanaflush has a germostat that's active against even staph germs. New Blue Sanaflush, the only in-tank cleaner that inhibits germ growth.
Attorneys for Vice President Agnew, armed with special powers of subpoena, contacted reporters today to try to learn the source of news leaks in the investigation into Agnew's affairs. Yesterday, a judge granted Agnew's lawyers subpoena powers in a move that was unusual and possibly unprecedented. The grand jury conducting the Agnew inquiry met again today in Baltimore, and it returned a new indictment against another man. Ron Nesson reports.
The grand jury arrived to hear evidence against the vice president for the second day in a row as the pace of the investigation quickened. The witnesses today seem to be more closely connected with Mr. Agnew's political career and the charges against him. The first witness was Joel Klein, a bankrupt land developer. According to published reports, he has told prosecutors he collected and distributed $100,000 to Mr. Agnew and other officials. After testifying, Klein said nothing and his lawyer said little.
Mr. Klein invoked no privileges of any kind and answered every question put to him. Did the questions involve Vice President Agnew? We have no comment on the subject matter of the questions.
Another witness was Ormsby Moore, assistant to Mr. Agnew when he was Baltimore County executive. The charges that Mr. Agnew took kickbacks from contractors go back to that period. A third witness was Eugene Shee, an engineer who won many county contracts when Mr. Agnew was Baltimore County executive.
The grand jury took time out from its investigation of the vice president to return an indictment on charges of income tax evasion against Dale Anderson, Mr. Agnew's successor as Baltimore County executive. Anderson was charged with not paying almost $68,000 in taxes on alleged kickbacks from contractors over a 4-year period. Anderson previously was indicted on 39 counts of extorting bribes from contractors. It's believed the prosecutors are trying to build the same kind of case against Vice President Agnew. Ron Nesson, NBC News, Baltimore.
Agnew has canceled a speech he was supposed to deliver next Thursday in Williamsburg, Virginia, but he is still scheduled to speak tonight in Chicago. The American Civil Liberties Union today urged Congress to begin impeachment proceedings against President Nixon. The ACLU charged there is what it called substantial public evidence the president took part in high crimes and misdemeanors that violated civil liberties. The possibility that the president may have been involved in crimes was also raised today by Samuel Dash, the chief counsel for the Senate Watergate Committee. Dash was in court arguing the committee's case for getting the White House tapes. Gordon Graham has more on that story.
The chief counsel for the Senate Watergate Committee, Samuel Dash, arrived at the Washington Federal Court building early, but had no comment for reporters. Charles Allen Wright, the president's lawyer, also arrived with time to spare, and he too was silent on the matter of the tapes. In the courtroom, Dash argued that the president could not claim executive privilege in refusing to produce the tapes when criminality is involved. He also pointed out this was the first time a prima facie criminal case had been made against the president. Wright responded by saying there was ample precedent to show that executive privilege had been honored in a number of similar cases. Judge Sirica interrupted to ask if the president had not waived his privilege by permitting his former aides to testify about what was on the tapes. Professor Wright said no, that in allowing limited disclosure, the president had not waived privilege. Later, Wright had a candid comment about the possible success of his argument.
I'd like to be successful in some case, somewhere, sometime. So far, I haven't won a thing.
It will be weeks before Judge Sirica issues a ruling in this case. But the key ruling in the Watergate tapes controversy is expected any day now from the Court of Appeals. That ruling will determine if the tapes can be reviewed by Judge Sirica, as he ordered in a case brought by Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Gordon Graham, NBC News at the Federal Courthouse, Washington.
The latest Gallup poll shows that only 32% of the people questioned approve of the president's performance in office. That's down 3 percentage points from 2 weeks ago, and it's only 1 point above Mr. Nixon's all-time low of 31% in the poll registered in August. Convicted Watergate conspirator G. Gordon Liddy today asked the U.S. Court of Appeals to grant him a new trial. Liddy charged that he didn't get a fair trial before Judge Sirica.
Take a break, take a snack. break. Take a Snick Snack.
Snick Snack Sticks. Light milk chocolate outside, light crisp cookie inside. The perfect break.
Take a break. Take a Snick Snack stick.
Take a break.
You know, I feel it.
It's sciatica.
The Uniroyals, they really stopped short.
I feel it. I really feel it. Then say it.
These Uniroyals really turned sharp.
We feel it too, don't we, Al?
That's right. You can actually feel the difference between Uniroyal steel-belted radials and your old bias ply tires. We feel it in our thrill show. You'll feel it on the road.
I feel it. I really feel it.
I know you do, my son.
Congressional conferees today took what may be the strongest action in American history to limit the power of the president to make war. A Senate House conference approved legislation which would end American involvement in any war after 3 months unless Congress agreed to let the war continue. The president has already said he will veto any such bill. Senator William Fulbright, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, said that even if the bill is vetoed, it will, in Fulbright's words, stand as a clear declaration of principles by the Congress, and I don't think it can be ignored. Here is what 2 members of Congress had to say about the legislation.
There's nothing in the Constitution, in the powers of the president, inferred, implied, or specifically stated, which would permit or should permit a president by himself, because of an incident or because of dangerous attack or whatever the case may be, to put the country at war over a long period of time. It's just not there. The power to declare war and maintain the country at war is the responsibility of the Congress, shared with the President of the United States as Commander-in-Chief.
If shackling the president means that a president shall jeopardize the lives and fortunes of all Americans, over 200 million of us, and jeopardize the peace of the world single-handed, then he should be shackled, and that's what the Constitution intended to do. But it will not shackle him in any way, in any authority, constitutional authority, or even human authority that a single man ought to have in a free country.
And that's what a majority of congressmen appear to believe. It is not what President Nixon believes, and what of the American people? David Brinkley's Journal tonight deals with them. David?
Now that Congress finally has voted to limit any president's power to start a war on his own say-so without the agreement, permission, or approval of Congress or anyone else, the American people may wonder why it took them so long. The Constitution says clearly that only Congress can declare war. Well, people may wonder why the president says he will veto this new bill, why any president should need or want the power to start a war entirely on his own, and may wonder why, if he does veto it, Congress cannot get up the 2/3 vote to override the veto. About 2 years ago, a psychologist named Kenneth Clark, speaking to his own professional association, recommended that in every big country having big armed forces, the head of government be kept on tranquilizing drugs to keep him happy, smiling, and passive, to hold down his warlike aggressiveness, lust for power and military glory, his secret longing to start a war and make himself a hero. Well, that may be an impractical idea, however interesting, but a completely practical, reasonable, and sensible idea is for Congress to demand that all future presidents obey the Constitution and fight no war unless Congress agrees. The last president who did, Lyndon Johnson, almost tore the country apart. Mr. Nixon says he will veto this bill because it infringes his power as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. But the only power he would lose would be a power he never rightfully had in the first place. The power to drag the American people into a needless war entirely on his own. John?
Lieutenant William Calley is one American caught up in an undeclared war in Vietnam. He was convicted of murdering 22 South Vietnamese civilians at My Lai and sentenced to 20 years at hard labor in prison. Today, Calley's lawyers went before the highest military court, the Court of Military Appeals, and asked that his conviction be thrown out. Robert Goralski has the story.
Lieutenant Calley was not here today. He remained at Fort Benning, Georgia, where he's been under house imprisonment for the past 2.5 years. His appeal was presented today by his attorneys. Captain Houston Gordon claimed Kelly's actions at My Lai amounted to nothing more than performing his duty as he understood it. He said Kelly's mind was not that of a murderer. His civilian attorney, George Latimer, said Kelly was the victim of what he called the most intense prejudicial reporting in American history. Government lawyers discounted the factor of pretrial publicity, insisted the trial was fair. They said Kelly is still guilty, even if he thought he was doing his job. After the hearing, Latimer said he expected the case to go on for a long time.
Number one, the president said he's going to review it. When he may do that, if it's affirmed, if it's reversed, it'd have to go back for another hearing, and so it'd be almost impossible to give you the time on it. It's after it clears this court, and then let's assume that they were to find against you, against us, then it would go to the Secretary of the Army and then to the President of the United States for its final process.
The Court of Military Appeals isn't expected to announce its decision for at least another 6 weeks. But it could be months or even years before the case of Lieutenant Kelly is finally resolved. Robert Goralski, NBC News in Washington.
Uh-oh. Somebody's big weekend is not panning out. But nobody ever didn't have fun bowling. Especially weekends. Bowling with friends, with the family, making that big strike. Now that's fun. This weekend, more lanes are available just when you are. For a really big weekend, there's no way you can miss.
What an upset stomach. I said, Frankie, where are we going tonight? He said, baby, you're in for a real treat. I said, terrific, but where are we going? He said, baby, you're in for a real treat.
You want sauerkraut or red onions?
I want some Alka-Seltzer.
When you have heartburn and headache, Alka-Seltzer relieves your headache and neutralizes all the acid your stomach has churned out.
You feel better now?
Yes.
Are you glad you came?
No.
Stock market prices turned down today in heavy trading. The Dow Jones Industrials were off more than 8 points. On the New York Exchange, the average price of a share lost 12 cents. On the American Exchange, the average price of a share lost 15 cents. In Washington, the Senate Finance Committee today approved a 7% increase in Social Security benefits. If enacted, that would replace the increase of almost 6% already voted by the Congress.